Hello, and welcome back to our podcast where we are walking through the Lutheran Book of Concord. My name is Pastor Jacob Swenson. I am the pastor of two Missouri Synod Lutheran churches in North Dakota. Today we're picking up in Luther's Large Catechism. We're continuing on with the meaning of the third commandment. We finished up the second commandment last time, and this time we're doing the third commandment, and we've already learned what does the third commandment mean? Well, it means that time should be set aside to rest from labor and to be devoted to hearing God's word. And this is not limited to a specific time or a specific day. Rather, and Luther says properly, this should be done every day. But for the sake of everyone who is not able to attend to God's word every single day, as in a public worship setting, Sunday has typically been observed by the Christian church. We're going to pick up in paragraph 88, and then we'll finish the third commandment today. Luther writes, "How then does such sanctification take place? As in, how is God's holy day made holy?" Luther said, well, by your actions, by what you're doing on it. Well, how does the day of Sabbath become sanctified by our actions? He says, well, not like this, sitting behind the stove and doing no rough work, or adorning ourselves with a wreath and putting on our best clothes. So it's not made holy by sitting around and doing nothing, or by putting on your Sunday best. He said, the day is holy, as we said above, when we occupy ourselves with God's word and exercise ourselves in the word. Indeed, we Christians ought always to keep such a holy day and be occupied with nothing but holy things. This means we should daily be engaged with God's word and carry it in our hearts and upon our lips. But as said above, since we do not always have free time, we must devote several hours a week, for the sake of the young, or at least a day for the sake of the entire multitude, to being concerned about this alone. We must especially teach the use of the Ten Commandments, the Creed, and the Lord's Prayer, so the Catechism, and so direct our whole life and being according to God's Word. At whatever time, then, this is being observed and practiced, there is a true holy day is being kept. Other things shall not be called a Christian's holy day. For indeed non-Christians can also stop working and be idle, just as the entire swarm of our church workers do. They stand daily in the churches singing and ringing bells, but they do not keep a holy day in true holiness, because they do not preach or use God's word, but teach and live contrary to it. So Luther's referring to the medieval Roman practice of offering the Mass kind of on a non-stop basis. You could go to a cathedral, say, and there's the main altar, and then there are two side altars, at least two, where Masses are continually being offered for both the living and the dead. And we'll come back later in our study on what's Luther's, well, not Luther's, but what is the scriptural beef with that. But Luther says that most of what these priests were doing, well, is they were just going through the motions, going through the words, and not because they wanted to be devoted to God's word or any of that, but they were just doing it. And so he's saying that this is not what it means to keep the Sabbath. Paragraph 91. God's word is the true holy thing, above all holy things. Yes, it is the only one we Christians know and have. Though we had, okay, so for holy thing, Luther uses a play on words. Pardon my German. Heiligtum, which in English means relic. So he's saying God's word is the only true relic. He says, though we had the bones of all the saints or all holy and consecrated garments upon a heap, still that would not help us at all. All that stuff is a dead thing that can sanctify no one. But God's word is the treasure that sanctifies everything. By the word, even all the saints themselves were sanctified. Whenever God's word is taught, preached, heard, read, or meditated upon, then the person, day, and work are sanctified. This is not because of the outward work, but because of the word, which makes saints of us all. Therefore, I constantly say that all our life and work must be guided by God's word, if it is to be God-pleasing or holy. Where this is done, this commandment is in force and being fulfilled. On the contrary, any observance or work that is practiced without God's word is unholy before God. This is true no matter how brilliantly a work may shine, even though it is covered with relics such as the fictitious spiritual orders, which know nothing about God's word and seek holiness in their own works. Note, therefore, that the force and power of this commandment lies not in resting. It's not about resting, but in the sanctifying, so that a special holy exercise belongs to this day. For other works and occupations are not properly called holy exercises unless the person is holy first. But here a work is to be done by which a person is himself made holy. This is done, as we have heard, only through God's word. For this reason, particular places, times, persons, and the entire outward order of worship have been created and appointed, so that there may be order in public practice. So much depends upon God's word. Without it, no holy day can be sanctified. Therefore, we must know that God insists upon a strict observance of this commandment and will punish all who despise his word and are not willing to hear and learn it, especially at the time appointed for the purpose. It is not only the people who greatly misuse and desecrate the holy day who sin against this commandment, those who neglect to hear God's word because of their greed or frivolity, or lie in taverns and are drunk dead like swine, but even that other crowd sins. They listen to God's word like it was any other trifle and only come to preaching because of custom. They go away again, and at the end of the year they know as little of God's word as at the beginning. Up to this point, the opinion prevailed that you had properly hallowed Sunday when you had heard a Mass or the Gospel read. But no one cared for God's word, and no one taught it. Now that we have God's word, we fail to correct the abuse. We allow ourselves to be preached to and admonished, but we do not listen seriously and carefully. So Luther says, the people who transgress against the third commandment are not only those who don't go to church, but also those who go to church purely out of habit or custom, who hear God's word preached, but don't listen or pay attention. He says before it was taught that you had kept the Sabbath day if you had heard the Mass spoken by the priest or the Gospel read, regardless of whether you were paying attention or not. If you just heard it, then you kept the Sabbath day. He says, but now that we have been carried out of this, now that we have God's word, we still abuse it by not paying attention during the sermon. Paragraph 98. Know, therefore, that you must be concerned not only about hearing, but also about learning and retaining God's word in memory. Do not think that this is optional for you or of no great importance. Think that it is God's commandment who will require an account from you about how you have heard, learned, and honored his word. Likewise, those fussy spirits are to be rebuked, who after they have heard a sermon or two, find hearing more sermons to be tedious and dull. They think that they know all that well enough and need no more instruction. For that is exactly the sin that was previously counted among mortal sins and is called Acadia, that is, apathy. This is a malignant, dangerous plague, with which the devil bewitches and deceives the hearts of many, so that he may surprise us and secretly take God's word from us. Let me tell you this. Even though you know God's word perfectly and are already a master in all things, you are daily in the devil's kingdom. He ceases neither day or night to sneak up upon you and to kindle in your heart unbelief and wicked thoughts against these 3 commandments and all the commandments. Therefore, you must always have God's word in your heart, upon your lips, and in your ears. But where the heart is idle, and the word does not make a sound, the devil breaks in and has done the damage before we are aware. On the other hand, the word is so effective that whenever it is seriously contemplated, heard, and used, it is bound never to be without fruit. It always awakens a new understanding, pleasure, and devoutness, and produces a pure heart and pure thoughts. For these words are not lazy or dead, but are creative, living words. And even though no other interest or necessity moves us, this truth ought to urge everyone to the word, because thereby the devil is put to flight and driven away. Besides, this commandment is fulfilled, and this exercise in the word is more pleasing to God than any work of hypocrisy, however brilliant. Wow, that was a great closing to the 3rd commandment. I think we'll stop there, and in our next session we'll pick up the 4th commandment. I'll see you then.